Right.
It's just so
Yeah. Were you here? So we, that's good. How many does that make for your family Friday? But it was nice. Good turkey. Love Thanksgiving food. Yeah.
No, I'm.
Okay, whatever. You can say that.
She just told me that last night.
okay, yeah.
So like,
We
you
should
can
get
take
mailed
every receipt and once you put each place.
Count.
Yeah, so we could just have one PO.
You get one PO and have the
Make sure
so
for like, so you wouldn't have to.
Okay, it's gonna work it out.
Then it's only not until we have to go for you again. Cause Because a lot
That's the
of
thing, whenever it's all in one, it becomes a little less searchable.
because it's always like for me to go back and look, and that's why they're so detailed.
You know, almost have to think about it.
Okay,
Yeah, totally.
at this time, I'd like to call to orders the special meeting of the Mahomet-Seymour Board of Education. It is 7:02 p.m. on Tuesday, December 3rd. I'd like to remind guests to please sign in and everyone to please silence your cell phones. I'd like to remind visitors, in order to facilitate an effective meeting, anyone who wishes to make comments to the board, please read the visitor guidelines found on the table outside the door, complete the attached public participation form, and get those to Dawn in the next couple of minutes. Thank you all for being here, and sharing your evening with us. Dawn, can we have a roll call, please?
Giles,
Here.
Keith,
Here.
Hendricks,
Here.
Schultz,
Here.
Larson, here, Hennessy, here, McComb.
Here, and could we stand for the pledge, please?
We've got it down.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. You can- Board members, this is a special meeting, so we need to stay with items that we published we're going to talk about. You have seen the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented for tonight?
So moved.
Thank you, Jeremy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Merle. Discussion on the agenda.
I would like to make a suggestion that we take off board working agreements from tonight. I'm not sure that,
The
It's in our
intention
best
is not to
interest to
really
have-
discuss the agreements. The intention is just to have a quick discussion about where we're at in the process.
Like an update?
Yeah, that's all that is. It's really an update, it's not a discussion, so. I'd prefer to leave that on, so we just kind of keep that in front of us. That's okay. Anything else? In favor, all those in favor, approve the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Public comment, do we have anything for tonight?
No.
All right, well, public, thank you for being here, and you'll have some opportunity later on to talk, if you wish. The main topic tonight is really item 6 on the agenda, which is community engagement. Community engagement is something we have been looking at for a while. We kind of put it on hold for elections a year ago, and then we've kind of put it on hold since as we've reorganized. And I think Dr. Hall gave you a little sheet that talks a little bit about it. The goal of community engagement is to set the groundwork for a new 5-year plan. We kind of completed the last 5-year plan right as Dr. Hall was getting here. And we need that, I think, to kind of focus us in the district and our superintendent and our key leaders. Tonight's, the goal of the discussion, as you can see, is to leave with some actionable steps to move forward to community engagement. That doesn't mean we'll have all the details worked out tonight, but we'll have an idea of where we want to go and how we want to consider doing it. Background information, I'm just going to run through some of this fairly quickly, is Board Policy 810 and the ISB Foundational Principles of Effective Governance #2, which talks about the board connecting with the community. The school board engages in an ongoing two-way conversation with the entire community. This conversation enables the board to hear and understand the community's educational aspirations and desires, and serve effectively as an advocate for the district's improvement and to inform the community of the district's performance. One thing I'd like to spend a minute talking about is why we want to do this. Now, there's some suggested bullet points here. Building trust with the community, listening, obtaining meaningful feedback, engage in and maintain two-way communications, create a sense of ownership, inform a strategic plan, and provide a venue for community to learn more about the school district. I guess first off, is there anything on there that you think should not be on the list, or any reasons you think we should add to the list. And why we want to go, is why we're doing this. I mean, it's a pretty good list, but if anybody had anything they wanted to? Okay.
So I guess my question is, to inform a strategic plan looks like the outcome to me, and all of the other bullet points listed are the mechanisms to do that. So is that true? Is that the reason that we are?
I would say, in my opinion, informing a strategic plan is a primary outcome. I would hope, I would hope building trust is an outcome, as a byproduct of what we're doing. Most of the rest of that are probably byproducts.
So, the effective government's number 2 is connecting with the community, but effective government's number 1 is setting a vision for the district. And I believe that we talked about in one of our first self-evaluation, like the first step we have to do is to set a vision. And we talked about that last summer too.
Okay.
And so, I guess I like this list, and I think this is a great idea, and I don't really have anything to add to it. But I just think it comes one step down the road. I feel as though we need to set our vision first, right? As the board, we're sort of setting this vision, and then we're engaging with the community to sort of see that happen.
But why can't we do it the reverse, engage the community and set our vision from that? Because they're our customer.
Or,
Well, if you read the thing we got, it said we're not supposed to be doing it as a perspective of a customer, but a perspective of the owner. Right, as owners, that's
I
what the
think-
packet she sent us said.
I think an updated vision statement is good. I think we can still do that prior to community engagement. Community engagement involves more lead time as far as setting up meetings and timeline. I think that if we put some things in place tonight on community engagement, we're probably not actually having any sessions until this spring, which still gives us plenty of time this spring if we want to refine our before then. If we want to have a study session and work on refining our vision and where we want to go, to have that in place before we meet with the community. I don't necessarily have a problem with that.
As a board though, we do represent our district. And to me, if you don't engage the community, you're not engaging your district. And our district and our community is made up of a lot of teachers that work here. And they have a lot more insight than we do. I don't see how we can set a vision based upon our experience that just takes place in meetings. You know, we're not on the ground floor doing that. Now, does that mean I'm contradicting what something says? Yeah, but I'm entitled to do that. You know, I just feel like you've got to figure out
So your thought
what people are invested in, and do some of our values align, you know?
So your thought is vision could be actually a part of this process.
Well, and especially since we had the joint meeting with the village and we talked about, you know, we have these class sizes and we have these facilities and where they are and what are we gonna do with that? And I mean, we have so many components that we go out and we ask for the community, yet we wanna write everything all on our own. And I feel like you know, we all agreed that the joint meeting at the village was a great opportunity for us to hear what people said. People were committed to being there. I appreciate Board Member Hennessy called in and did it. I just think it's important to look at the scope before you go. That's just my opinion.
I think part of, I'm in agreement with both of you. I think part of what community engagement, for me, I'm struggling with, because we talk about community engagement as if it is a task. And for me, community engagement is a culture. And so setting community engagement to me doesn't seem like the right language, because it's not a one and done type of thing. So I need a better understanding of what it is we're trying to do. So for example, a vision, I did a little work just so that I could clarify my examples. A vision, you know, the definition of vision is focuses on tomorrow and what an organization wants to ultimately become. And so the vision, I think, is something that needs to at least have a high level outline, before we go into the community to ask them how they think we can best support that vision. A mission is something that focuses on today and what an organization is going to do to achieve that ultimate vision. And so it's those tactical things that you can go and then actually get some meaningful input on. A vision is such a broad statement, so I did a little bit of work just so that I could give you an example. So I put down as what I would set for a vision is that Mahomet-Seymour will be a district that meets the educational and emotional needs of their students and staff at the highest level and prepares our students to enter the world with the skills and temperament needed to be highly successful. So that is such a broad, sweeping thing. Then underneath that, you have to have a mission, which is a little bit more tactical. So under that example, what I said was Mahomet-Seymour will enact policies and procedures that clearly direct staff and students in a manner that clearly supports our mission of excellence. We will build a culture of inclusion and trust that results in all stakeholders being represented and valued as part of building a strong district. And the decisions made by the district will include input and feedback from all stakeholders and will include an assessment piece that clearly communicates the effectiveness of policies and the outcomes that result from the decisions and policies. If we don't have that before we go to the public, I don't know how effective our questions will be, because the next step down from that is to talk about specific areas of focus on how you achieve that mission. So, for example, I gave the example of space, right? So how do we target space goals that support the educational and emotional needs of students and staff? To me, that would be the question I would want to ask a community for input on. What is important to the community when it comes to space? So I highlighted class sizes would be a part of that because I can't dictate what the space looks like without knowing what our target class size might be. Class sizes then dictate appropriate staffing. Appropriate staffing then dictates physical needs. And then the physical needs turns into a facilities plan. And so there has to be a stacking process for how we go about this so that we understand what we're asking the community for input on in a meaningful way that we can then turn into results. A way to set ourselves up, I think, for less than optimal success rate and also to maybe frustrate the community is to get input that we don't then turn into actual mechanisms and goals and processes.
But it's important to hear from them so that we represent them and not our own opinions. And that's where I'm on the midline of being amicable to having a vision, but wanting to hear what people said, because we have to have a united vision and not have it be individualized to what we think our needs are.
So in terms of going to the public to set that vision, what do you see that looking like then?
I mean, most people that recently ran in an election, you know, you have many of you get up here and this is a good thing. I mean, they say, this is what I heard from people, this is what I heard from people. I wasn't recently elected, so I'm basing all that information about what you say, but I don't hear that from people other than you. And I would like to know what is representative of people's opinions, how they look at space, those kind of things. Like, does that mean that we do some kind of survey online where we send something out on Skyward and we ask them? I mean, I want their input because they have a better idea. We have people that have lived here 20 years and 7 years and 6 years, and we have this small, compact idea of what we think things look like, but some of these people represent people that are a bigger picture. They have younger kids and want it to look different. You have kids in small and old, and I feel like we present only the perspective that we know from this side, and that's kind of one-sided lens, and I think I need to see the other side of the lens.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we don't go to the public. I think that's part of community engagement, but unless we understand what we're asking. So space, for example. Space is an important question, but we could target who we ask about space, because a taxpayer who doesn't have kids in the district might not need to weigh in on what the space looks like. They're gonna need to weigh in on how we pay for whatever we determine the space is gonna look like. But unless we can target our question, our information gathering, and understand if we're trying to talk about space, that is going to encompass trying to reach the most people possible which is not going to be a town hall scenario. It would be more of a survey, a web page. Until we get to defining what it is we want to ask people about, the mechanism for how we ask those questions and then turn that into data that's useful to us is difficult to do. So I think we have to do the pre-work of not just setting a town hall session and assuming that that is going to get us the information that we're asking for. So if we don't have a vision and a mission, at least at a high level, I guess that we actually have policies that have a vision and a mission already in existence. I've never heard anybody tell me that they didn't like that mission or that vision. But we have to have some overarching statement that allows us to drill down into what then becomes data points for us. And until we do that and have the ability to drill down, then we don't know the most effective way to go and get that information from the community. For space, you can define, if you get to the task level, you can define who you think the relevant stakeholders are for each of those tasks. That makes it easier for you to understand the mechanism for controlling and capturing that data. It allows you to set goals about what is a response rate that you think is big enough to make decisions on. I wouldn't want to send a survey out, get 3 responses on space and feel like I really understood what the community was telling me. But if you don't get to that level of planning for this process, I think we miss opportunities and we're not as effective with our data. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying I think we have some pre-work that we better do. And that's why my question was, what are we walking out of here tonight with? I don't want to set a town hall meeting without having done some of this.
And that's kind of like a
Let
needs
me-
assessment,
let
like
me
where are we?
Help you. What I'm hoping we walk out here tonight with is a plan on how we're going to move forward with this. I don't see us setting community meetings tonight,
Okay.
okay? Because who's gonna run those? What are they gonna be? All that. But I'd like to walk out of here with a general timeline of the pieces we think we need to accomplish and a general plan for accomplishing those. If you look down to how, and you've touched on some of these already, we have town hall meetings, we can do surveys, we can do a combination of both. One of the things on here is an outside facilitator. I think we need to look strongly at that and bring someone in who can help guide us through the process. And maybe one of the processes I'll recommend is we have a meeting before we set any other meetings where we talk about vision. Maybe they'll say, no, that needs to come from the community too. I don't know. But I see with this group, I see us doing a lot of wheel spinning on this. Okay? And we've spun wheels on this in my, for a year now. Okay? And I think we need to get someone in to help us sort through the process and put a timeline in place.
I agree with the fact that they mentioned that the mechanism needs to meet the message, match the message. I like that because surveys would be one thing very, very different than a dialogue. But I want to go back to your original question, which is number 3, why are we doing this? And that list seems to me to be rather about us.
Mm-hmm.
I think our engagement also is to understand the needs of the community in ways that we may not yet know. And that is the regular dialogue that's needed to keep this thing up and not just once every strategic plan cycle or just to establish a shared vision. I think it's far more tactical than that. So I think that, and also to establish a mechanism for informal dialogue with people who wouldn't necessarily show up here and have a conversation. So that's the continuing, repetitive, we ought to do this more often kind of idea.
Right.
That makes more sense to me than just this list.
When is the last time you had a community engagement initiative?
Well, it depends how you want to define community engagement. Dr. Hall has done building dialogue 3 times a year. That's a piece of community engagement. That's an ongoing piece. meetings. And I think to Megan's point earlier, there's some things that we do ongoing and there's some things that we do special effort, okay? As far as special effort community engagement, that would have been back, I think, right when Superintendent Johnson arrived. And we did the 5-year plan.
And how did you engage the community with that 5-year plan?
At that point, I think we used IASB to come in and facilitate it. We had some folks in the community that participated in the process. We did the same thing back when Dr. Oates was here.
But I also.
As far as special effort community engagement.
But then there's programming and things that we provided to engage the community too, you know, like fitness and health and nutrition and emotion. And we've had people come in, and that lady that came in, you guys were there in August and talked about, you know, monitoring appropriate behavior on a cell phone. That was like August of last year, you know. So there's different ways that we have reached out saying we need to do these things because these are what our families are asking for, information that they want, you know. So, I mean, how do you define it? Because it can look like a lot of different things.
You know, we've added more public participation in our meetings. That's a piece of community engagement. That's not necessarily a special effort community engagement. That becomes part of maybe the ongoing piece. And maybe we need to continue to look at the ongoing piece. I'm not saying we've got that solved.
So your end product from this is a 5-year plan. I'm just trying to understand what our end product is.
My end product from the special effort is a 5-year plan, yes. Now, might that also include some input from the community on how to continually engage more effectively? That might be part of it too.
So how do we know what to ask about the 5-year plan if we don't do some pre-work on vision, mission, and task level discussions?
I believe we need to do some pre-work on that.
Okay.
But I think we need to have someone help us focus on that, because I think given to ourselves, we're gonna be all over the boards on this.
Well, with all due respect, I did do this professionally for a decade, and I am more than willing to lead a study session and see if we can get somewhere on this.
Understand that and appreciate that.
No, that's okay. So I don't always feel, I mean, having done this professionally, if you have the ability to do it in-house with people who are stakeholders and members of the community, it's always a little bit more effective than having an outside facilitator.
Here's my concern about that. You've done this professionally. I've done this. Dr. All's done stuff like this before. We probably had other board members that have done stuff like this before. This, in my mind, this needs to become a dialogue with the community, and we want everyone to participate. I don't want this to be a referendum on who's leading the charge. First of all, there's two pieces, okay? If I'm gonna run it, we may attract or unattract some people based on the personality who's running it. I don't want that to be the case. The second thing is, I think, is on the whole, we need to be listeners to the community. We need to understand what's being said. And we need not to interject, I don't think, during the whole collection of information. Now, we may have some input with the facilitator ahead of time and say, here's kind of here's some things we'd like you to do, and here's some things we'd like to investigate, and here's where we want to hear from the community. But I think when it comes time to actually hearing from the community, we need to have ears open and not have direct involvement. I think that's a better outcome. I think we get a better sampling from the community.
See, I guess this is where my initial question came, is because you're talking about a town hall setting. I think having a separate facilitator for a town hall setting is probably a good idea. But back to my initial question is, if we are trying to culturally change, then a town hall is really a single task in a community engagement plan. It's not the end product, it's not the only thing that we're doing. So I guess what I was suggesting is that for the upfront vision and mission and tasks and defining the tasks and then getting to the point, I think this group is more than capable of saying, if we are trying to get the input of all the parents and all the taxpayers, a survey is probably the best way to do that. And then figuring out the mechanisms for doing that. I don't know that we need a facilitator to lead that part of it. Once we get to actual execution of the different ways we go and get data from the community, I think the idea of who facilitates that and then how we collect that data back. If we do a survey, we need to think through who writes the survey, who reviews the survey, who collects the data, who presents the data. So I think I'm suggesting we need either a study session or something that talks about the actual process of community engagement and starts to define all the different things we want to do and ask the public, but without understanding the vision and the mission. And that's why I keep saying, is what we're looking for as a product of this a 5-year plan for what we're gonna do strategically at the end of this, that 5-year plan would include ongoing mechanisms for community engagement? Or are we looking for a facilities plan and knowing what we're building in the next 5 years? Or are we looking for a curriculum plan and understanding what the community wants us to do from a curriculum perspective? Until we define what that end product is, I'm having a hard time understanding how we just jump into figuring out, you know, if we need an outside facilitator or even all of the touches that we want to make with the stakeholders.
My interpretation has been the vision has been a comprehensive 5-year plan. It would include some curriculum pieces. It would certainly drive some facilities and financial decisions, but it would be the overall plan is to be a comprehensive plan.
Is that what everybody else kind of feels is? I mean, I'm just trying to get to a definition of, you know,
That's what I would
strategic
assume
plan
is that, yes,
and what
I mean,
community engagement plays
we
into.
need to have all those components to be able to move forward. It's more than just facilities, it's more than just curriculum, it's more than just finances, it's all of those things put together plus more. And to me, I feel like it's gotta be simpler than the way we are making it to be right now. I mean, I guess, to me, I think the community wants us to educate their kids and they want us to be good stewards of their finances. And, you know, there's probably some more details in that, but you know, we could get really complex and do this for a long, long time. But I think there's probably a simple way to do it, and we need that information. We need to know what the community values, and that might help us inform what our vision and mission is going to be. We have some already, but I think it's not wrong to reevaluate that. But we've got to figure out how to get that information from the community. And like you said, that might be a survey, but there's some people who aren't going to participate in that. You know, how are we going to get the most people to participate from, you know, the farmers, the business owners, the taxpayer? I mean, everybody's a taxpayer, but all those people, different groups of people, and bringing it together. And I think that's what we need to be talking about right now is, let's just find a way to get this done simply and efficiently, and have it done, you know, so we can understand how to move forward.
Even with the survey piece up front, I think there's people that have done that and can help us put that together to be very effective. And they've got a lot more experience with that than maybe what we've had in a school setting.
Well, and I think that's where we have to, if you're gonna do a survey, you've gotta know, you know, what's a valid sample size that we can, you know, really glean information from. We can't just throw a survey out there and then we get a bunch of answers and we don't really know, is it even valid? I mean, so I think we have to have some help with things like that. And even the way you write the questions, I mean, just all of those things have to be taken into account.
One of the groups we've stumbled across, and there are others, I think, but there's a company called Unicon Art. They're out of St. Louis. Dr. Hall has used them before, but they can be as comprehensive as we would like them to be as far as helping us to work through a plan. Interesting in talking to Damien and BLDD up in Chicago, they have also partnered with that same company before. So it's a company that probably could help us in the beginning to figure out what we need to get information about, help us figure out the best way to get that information. And then on the facilities piece, if they're involved doing something, a project, they have worked with the LED before. Now, I'm not saying they're the magic answer, but I'm saying they're an option. But we could look at it, a presentation from them. Another option we could do is there's other companies besides them that do this. We can put out an RFP, a request for proposals, and see who comes by our way and what services they offer and what the cost would be to do that. And that might be, an option.
That's right, and I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. There's people who have done this before, and can help us through that process. And I don't disagree with the process you have outlined here necessarily, but it's just, I think if we try to do it ourselves, we're gonna spend a lot of time and spin wheels, for months. And if someone has done this for larger organizations, professionally, for a living, then I think we can get people, it doesn't have to be the IESB, it can be anybody. I mean, there's other organizations that do this that can help us refine this process without us having to reinvent the process.
Well, why don't we put together a RFI,
RFP.
it's a request for information at this point, right?
Okay, well, could be.
Or request for proposal, whatever letter you want to attach to the end of it. And that way we can understand what services are out there and what we're really looking to accomplish.
Right.
And pick a vendor if that's what we feel is the best way to do it.
I think the RFP is a good way to go. I also think specifically that the sequencing of a survey first, followed by face-to-face with the public is excellent. It makes a lot of sense to learn as much as we can from a broad audience to be able to target what we put in front of the public for the face-to-face time, make it most valuable.
So you just sent out the email for the 5 essential survey, but does the results to that doesn't come until April? Is that right?
Yeah, we get preliminary results in April, and then, after that, we get the final results. It's not, the 5 essential survey is focused on learning and achievement, and what are the factors in schools that, and I'm giving the Reader's Digest version here, but that enhance learning and achievement. So that's it's very valuable data, but I don't think that it's totally,
I was just thinking of other
it's
data
absolutely
things we
community
can use.
engagement, and it can fit in here, but it's most useful, you heard when our principals did their school improvement plans, they looked at the 5 essential survey to inform their school improvement plans. I don't know that it really would guide it's a little more in the weeds than what I guess a strategic plan would be for the board, but it's still valuable data.
So if we-
RFP, there's something Trent would prepare, I'm assuming, typically.
Sure, we can do that. What we need to do though is know, like, what are we gonna ask a company to, we're gonna say, if you're looking for requests for proposals or
Right.
information, either one, to do what? What do we?
I think,
Well,
everyone feel free to chime in.
I think that we need someone who can help us canvass the community to get, like Megan says, those solid data points where you can actually make decisions. And that's why I think the process has got to be super important. We have to have good data to make decisions going forward, and so we need someone that can help us sample the community and get responses. I agree. I don't know that a town hall meeting or even a survey or, we could have 10 meetings next year, and I don't know that we would ever get really good valid data points for making decisions.
And I think maybe some upfront time with us, helping crystallize what we're trying to do here. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, it sounds to me like what we're looking for is assistance with the process of developing a strategic plan.
Right.
Right.
Isn't that what you did professionally for 10 years?
It is.
So I guess I just don't understand why we would spend money before we even try to use the people we have that want to do it, that are on the board and have the stake in the matter. Well, we haven't even tried yet.
I agree with the role that we should play as the board is to not necessarily lead our own discussion. I've done this plenty of times as well, and I think it would be wrong to get my head in the leadership mode and not the participative mode. I think that would just be a mistake. I'd rather as board members participate with somebody else pushing us along.
You're talking about developing the process, not actually executing it, right?
Right, I mean, I guess. I guess I just don't feel like it's as difficult as we're making it seem. That I'm getting multiple people a week from every different viewpoint giving me feedback. Not that that's community engagement, but it's not as though the people are that
But
far away.
That
I mean,
is-
you know,
That is community engagement.
it's community engagement. And I don't feel like we have to hire someone to help us do what we're supposed to be doing, which is engaging with the community. And
But how do you know you're getting a true sample of the community by that
but how would you know if someone came in?
information? Well, that's what I mean, they're gonna do it on more of a scientific basis, and I don't know, Megan might be able to answer that a little bit better, but to me, I mean, yes, you get a lot of people talking to you, but you're also, you know, the people that talk to you may choose to talk to you for a certain reason. They may choose to talk to me for a certain reason. So we're not getting real valid, unbiased data from the community like Megan was talking about. We need these solid data points that we need to have in order to make decisions. I certainly, absolutely agree with all the community engagement that we can do. I mean, we have to have that information from people one-on-one here in board meetings. But I think there's consultants that do this. If Megan wants to come up with a proposal on how to do it, and that's fine too. That could be part of it, you know, but I think we need to look at what are our options with that. You know, if Megan's got a proposal on how she would do it, we've got someone else who's got a proposal on how they would do it. And that's just my opinion. I just feel like, you know, we can have many, many meetings, surveys or whatever, and we'll get feedback, but how do we know how to make decisions from that? I mean,
I suspect there's two benefits that come out of that. One is the mere process of putting together an RFP will force us to put what we think on paper of our own about what we think is the process that we're asking for. And I think secondly, whoever we get on responses to the RFP will tell us something to do that we might not have thought of, and all that's very helpful. And then I think we can make a decision from there.
Well, and there might be something to learn, and I think there would be something to learn, talking to people that have done this with schools.
well, and I have no objection if Megan wants to put together a proposal on how you would do it. That's fine with me.
I mean, I'll put something
really
together.
don't. So,
In terms of vision and mission, we all sit with sticky notes. You say two things that are important, you put it up there. The vision kind of comes, I mean, this is not, I mean, I did do this, and I hate to say this, but this is not rocket science here, right? I mean, I think we collectively just need a format for putting what we think is important up on a board and then putting sentences to that. It's not, you know, in terms of if we want to get into the weeds of how we are going to send surveys and what software we're going to use, we might need some help there in terms of organizations that do that, or just simply a mechanism for ensuring that people feel like it's third-party data and they can be honest. I mean, we know one thing about surveys for sure is that if people feel like they want to be anonymous and they're not anonymous, they will not give you the real information. So in terms of how we mechanize that capture of that data, I think that's certainly something that we would probably have to go out there and figure out how to do. In terms of the calendar of, could we all sit down at a planning session and say, by February, we want a vision and a mission, and we've got we've used a study session to do that. I don't think we need help doing that, but that's just my opinion. I think it's something, and quite honestly, we could try it without spending any money, and if it's a total failure, we can approach it a different way. But I think we need to understand what it is that we're trying to define. If we're trying to define the actual data capture from the process that we want to put in place and figuring out what we as a consultant's going to come in here and say, what's important to you guys?
Right.
They're not going to tell you what's important because it's not their community. It's not, if you don't have investment, it's not your ideas, you won't get it done. Any consultant worth their salt will tell you that. So they will just simply ask a number of questions, and I can put some questions down and you can do an RFI. I just think it's getting questions down. We can have a document where we all put questions down, or we have, but it's what are the things that are important to us, and that will dictate how we understand what the tasks are that we ask the community for input on. Space, curriculum, extracurricular activities, student safety. I mean, these big buckets, I think we can come up with the buckets on our own, and then if we need help figuring out how to mechanize those buckets into questions that we get input on, I think we could do that. But this is not hard. What's the bucket? Who are the stakeholders for each bucket? What do we think, based on the stakeholders, if we say the stakeholders, the whole community, what is the representation in terms of response rate we would feel comfortable with, feeling like we saw trends? I mean, those are things we could probably come up with ourselves, but that's what I'm talking about.
If we start working on an RFP right now, we're not gonna, if we start, we tell central office staff to start crafting an RFP, we won't have something approved until the earliest would be December 16th. By the time it goes out, comes back, study it, we would be pushing hard to find anybody by February. In the meantime, if we wanted to have a January or February study session and start working on a vision and mission statement, I think that's great. We've got nothing, if we can get that done and not pay consultants to come in and do it, that's great. I'm good with that. But I think to lead the process, I think it's important to have someone who's done schools, someone who's not connected to us. And
So what's the RFP gonna be for?
I would see the RFP as putting out a probe to find a company or consultant that can lead the district through one piece of community engagement and process. Because I really loved what you said about community engagement is part of the culture of an organization. And I think we've made some really great strides and have done some things in the meetings to hear, and there's other ways we hear from our constituents, and all of you hear from people individually and have those one-on-one talks. But another piece of community engagement is literally getting people in a room and hearing back from them, as is doing surveys or canvassing or getting hard data from the community. And that is a process that I don't think it needs to be complicated, but I also really have seen it work best. I've got limited experience, but some experience, when the board members are listeners and observers and not leading or participating as being active listeners, but not.
And I wasn't suggesting that I would lead that part of it. I guess my question is when we get to the town hall, how does that if we don't know what it is that we're asking, is it just to throw it open and everybody
Oh,
tells
no.
us what's important?
No,
Do we have a set of questions?
No, there's absolutely.
So that's what I'm trying to understand is what's the end product of the town hall and how does that end product fit into what I think needs to be a cultural change to include community engagement, and then is that still to facilitate a strategic plan?
I think one outcome of it is a strategic plan. Another outcome of it is that you've instilled a process in the district, in the community that's ongoing. And that was one of the bullet points there is engage in and maintain two-way communication. So one thing that an RFP could ask for would be how if you have a series of whatever we're gonna call it, town hall meetings, focus groups, and the board has decided what is it that we wanna hear from the community, because I agree, like right now, we don't know that. Those are questions that we would need to decide on. You just mentioned a few topics that probably would wanna get feedback on. An outside facilitator, part of what they can do is, I guess, kind of summarize and bring back and what comes to mind is like putting together the themes of what we've heard from the community, and that informs a long-term strategic plan.
Do we have study session dates available in January, February, or not?
There's nothing scheduled, but there are open dates, I'm sure. We do not have there's not a study session scheduled for January or February, so there's
So there's
be some
an
opportunities to schedule that. I also agree, Megan, just you all could get together, knock out a vision and mission very quick. I love what you wrote. I mean, it's a great starting point.
I mean,
I don't think that's it's, I agree. It's
I
simple.
don't think it's that hard.
I agree.
I guess my hesitation here is I keep hearing that we're engaging in two-way communication. I have to be real honest here. A town hall cannot be the only way that we do this. We have got to
I don't
have.
think anybody's saying we.
I'm not limiting to
Okay,
that at all.
No way.
We keep saying that we're gonna schedule that and a facilitator. I also would think we need to work on what are the other ways that we're gonna engage in the community, and those have to be set up for that same time frame as well. Because some people won't make it to the town hall,
Oh, yeah,
some
they
people
won't.
don't feel comfortable in that setting. So I just don't wanna walk out of that facilitated environment where they come to us with themes that only came from that one bubble, because it is a bubble at that point. So
And there's even
we have
different
to
age groups.
incorporate that single event into a broader plan that also informs us of the other things that the community has to say.
But that's where the question I have is how do we get that without, because there's selection bias in every aspect of that, you know? So how are we going to get all of that information from people and making sure we're including as many people as possible and have it be valid? I mean, that's where my concern is that you get people who have opinions, but they don't show up to meetings. They have opinions, but they don't fill out surveys. You know, that's where I think we need some guidance is how do we get the most input from people to make this a valid process? And not just a facilitator, but somebody who can.
Right, how do we mesh the pieces together
Right,
to become
so-
a process? I would suggest that out of tonight, we do two things. We work on, and I think you've got enough information probably to draft an RFP. And we get that piece moving forward, and I think we look for a date in January, February, where we can do a vision and mission statement and work on some of that internal. I think that's great. I don't know how you want to go about picking that date.
All right, let's look at January.
You got calendars tonight, we can do it. Huh?
Did anybody have anything here?
Where,
Yeah, we'll throw it out here.
is the 13th or board meeting, is that right?
No, it's the 21st in
Oh,
January.
that's right, 'cause
It's
March.
later in January always, isn't it?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
when the regular one is, the 21st.
So like, I don't know, I'll just, what about the week of the 6th or the 13th, what do those look like?
Is there a day of the week that people,
I'm fine with Monday the 6th.
Depends on the week, huh?
I don't know if I can be there that day, but that's okay.
I said the week of the 6th.
I think the week of the 6th is out for some people.
I'm out that week.
You're out that week?
okay, so what about the 13th?
Okay.
It's a Monday, does Monday still work for you?
Monday, perfect.
Monday the 13th works.
If it doesn't work, say so right now.
The 13th doesn't work for me, I'm sorry.
Okay. How about the 14th?
That works.
Yes.
Anybody that the 14th doesn't work for?
Alright,
Alright,
excellent,
Tuesday the
sweet.
14th.
7 o'clock.
Sure.
Study session.
Yeah. Vision, mission, study session. Okay. So I'll lock this in our phones that we're not supposed to have out now. Alright. That will be good. Anything else anybody on the board wants to bring up under community engagement at this point?
So when you put together the RFP, are you gonna send it to the board first and we'll have a look over it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Before it goes out?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Well, yeah,
I think it should probably be an agenda item on the 16th.
it'll be an agenda item on the 16th, but
Okay.
we should have a draft before then.
Can I add something real quick? There's a lot of document sharing amongst IASBO, my professional organization, IESA. There's bound to be several examples out there that we can really start with,
Great.
that kind of thing.
Okay.
People have done this before.
Before we leave this topic, I don't know if anyone in attendance has any comments or thoughts, but we allot 5 minutes if anybody does. And so does anyone in the audience have anything they want to add or comment on with this topic? Every chance.
Have we been working without a mission and a vision all of this time?
No, we have one.
We have one, okay, I should know that. I
It's
just-
not been updated for a while.
Okay, so it's a lens that you look at through
Yeah.
for everything, and you're like, man, that's somehow gotten lost in there, and we need to have something that we're making decisions as we look through that lens for everything.
I think the thought here is we're launching a major look at a new strategic plan. We're trying to take a major look at what community engagement looks like moving forward and what the district looks like moving forward. So it's a good time to go back and address all that and make sure that we've got what we want.
Are we still doing the parent-teacher advisory committees, and could we utilize that for some feedback and guidance? I know other districts have, different parent-teacher, advisory committees for different topics. It might be, curriculum, and it might be mental health and social emotional. Could we look at, getting those working and maybe getting more frequently meeting? And getting input from those groups with more focused topics and meet more frequently.
And certainly the people that serve on those groups, would be the kind of people we would want involved in this process, yeah.
I think when you take on a plan like this, just in general, part of what you do is you define your stakeholders. And then once you have defined stakeholders, that would certainly be maybe a stakeholder group. You start to then take it down a level to say, what are the topics you want to review and go to those stakeholders on, and then what's the level of frequency? And so when you drill down into a plan, that's really the level of detail that you would want to get to. So I think your suggestion of looking at stakeholder groups that already exist and how well are we utilizing those, and how does that fit into a plan moving forward is a good one.
And the Bulldog dialogues we've done, I think have always been very helpful, that we've done in the past. Are we having any of those this year?
So
I haven't seen any.
I've not done them. I'll be really honest, we've had a lot of board meetings since September.
Yes.
And that combined with just wanting to have this discussion and seeing if somehow Bulldog dialogue could be wrapped into some of
Like a
this.
town hall kind of thing,
But
yeah.
I look at that as just one piece of community engagement and,
So I thought they were always helpful.
Yeah.
I thought they were really good and it was a kind of a good step.
We probably.
I think that a good topic to have that would be kind of providing an overview about this process at some point.
Yeah, just to say, here's where, because I don't know how many people watch, but for a 5-year plan, here's why we're going to be doing this survey. You might get this call, you might get this mail, you might get this person knocking on your door if you don't respond to either one, and here's why. And then could we have a couple of different mission and visions, and then maybe let people vote on them? Or would that be too open-ended? Because then people could, have input on them, or do you want to get all the input and then do the vision?
I
It's just a
think we're good
thought.
with input on that. I think probably the group around the table feels like we're the group that
Should be setting that vision.
should set it, but certainly,
With the input
certainly
from
input's
everybody.
important.
To make our decision.
I mean, generally speaking, a vision and a mission are really broad, and they're broad for a reason, because you bounce your decision making against that, but they're only really helpful if you've then done the drill down to understand, as you make decisions, what are the priorities under that vision and that mission that you set out, so that as you come to a decision, you say, okay, in this bucket, does this fulfill our mission, and is this more important than anything else that we have on the table? So I guess my hope is traditionally vision and mission are broad enough that the community would get behind that, but then as we drill down, that the community could help formulate more of those task level or bucket, I don't know, for lack of a better term, buckets.
We're a public school, right? So our vision statement is probably gonna have something to do with public education. Domino's Pizza's mission statement isn't gonna look that way.
Right.
But ours would probably look very similar to some other school districts.
I think as we look at RFP data and whatever outside information we can get to help us with this, I think surveying folks that we trust in this community elsewhere in the state, other states, whoever we know, gathering that information would be really helpful for us early on. What are other mission and vision statements, but also what are these other school districts doing for community engagement? You may have some of that already, but I think it'd be helpful for all of us just to see whether there's something we can learn from some others pretty quickly as we set our own standards.
Alex, you said that when Rick came, you did a community engagement and specific with ISB. Could you send us all that report, just so that we can read what the report was?
I don't, if we can find it. I don't know what we've got left on that, quite frankly.
That was pretty specific to what we wanted in a superintendent at that time.
But I mean, if we did engage in a community engagement
Yeah,
with an
we
external
did.
company,
Yeah,
I mean, I guess what I'm
we've
saying
got
is,
something, I don't know.
if I could read it, then I might get an idea of what
Yeah.
the difference is between this engaging with a company and just doing our thing.
I just don't wanna promise what's there, could have left the door with Rick, I don't know. We'll see what we got. Okay, anything else on community engagement? Next up is working board agreements. Again, no intention to dive into those tonight, except that we had said coming out of our previous meetings where we talked about the board.
Self-evaluations.
Thank you, self-evaluation is what I was looking for. That working agreements was kind of what we wanted to do. We'd originally set a date to get our thoughts in to Dawn. I think a lot of us have our thoughts in, I think a couple of us don't. I know there's a couple different thoughts out there on this whole process. You know, do we need to spend some more time working together before we define the working agreements? One of my concerns is that I think working agreements would kind of help us to come together that way. So we've got a lot of balls in the air, and we're not gonna certainly devote a lot of meetings to that right now. But from my perspective, it would be good to get things into Dawn, and if Dawn could create an initial draft that could come back to us, and then at sometime in the next several months, we would be able to get together and finish that process. That's my thoughts on that. I don't know what everybody else has or thoughts on that you want to share, but.
Can we look at that, the January study session, where we just spend a short period of time reviewing what's been
Probably
compiled?
depends how much time we're gonna spend on Vision Mission.
Yeah, but I mean, for this, something maybe just kind of an initial edit, and then it comes back up again in another study session or something, another meeting
Just to
later.
look at what we've got.
All right, I'm just gonna say what, I asked that this be tabled for a reason. I feel like part of the struggles that this board has already had and where we kind of rub up against each other has been around process and procedure and policy so far. And I feel like we still are working through agreeing on how those work. And I'm not super interested in adding another layer to that until I feel like we've just got the basics running in a smoother fashion than we do now. So I would like to table it for a while until we just get on the same page about the things we've already agreed to do.
I think you're spot on with the first part of that comment. That's kind of why I want to keep those moving, to kind of help us continue to move together. I mean, you know, we kind of worked through some things, I think we have, but we've not spelled out what we've kind of worked through, really.
Because we didn't have any out yet, that's, maybe, I can't speak for Megan, but that's why I came to policy today with the draft that I have for the next meeting of outlining the process of that. Megan had one kind of at the last meeting, because I think there's just, it will help define the cycle, because we don't have this yet.
And maybe if there's some pieces we don't all agree on yet, we just say, hey, these are pieces we don't all agree on yet. But I think as much as we do agree on, it would be nice to have that in place so we all know we agree on it.
I look at it as a challenge to be better before we take on the additional tasks of engaging with the public. So I differ slightly on that I think we ought to address as much as we can there before we take on the additional duties that are gonna challenge us even more.
I guess one of my thoughts is until we look at the combined document with all of our stuff on it, we don't know what we all agree with and what we don't.
That's what I'm saying, if we had a chance to look at what's been compiled, then we can, you know, make some decisions on next steps after that. I'm not asking anybody to agree on something in January, it's just, what do we have in front of us, and then we can decide what's next.
Is there any board member who hasn't submitted it that just doesn't want to submit suggestions? And we should just move forward and.
I haven't submitted for the reasons that I felt like we have made agreements on previous things, and then as, you know, recent as 2 meetings ago, it wasn't upheld, and I can't see adding a layer to that if we aren't even fulfilling the agreements we've already made with each other.
I feel like there's so much conflict when we have rules that aren't followed, that adding more rules to the list doesn't seem like that's gonna reduce the conflict.
I didn't look at it as rules, I looked at it almost as, it says agreement, but an expectation. When you went through the things that Dean sent us, it was like, that you would do this in a timely manner, that you would do this in definition. So I think that's where we always have just a non-allegiance, is that interpretations are so varied. I don't know that I mean,
Okay.
like you just said you wanted to table it, but Colleen was the one who opened the meeting with it, so there's just a different interpretation on things.
But Colleen asked to remove it from the agenda. She didn't ask to open with it.
Yeah, but I'm confused because she did ask for it to be taken off the agenda, and then you just said you wanted it taken off the agenda. It's hard for me.
I had asked for it to be taken off the agenda in
In
an
advance?
email.
She'd asked in
Yes.
advance.
In the meeting today,
She-
okay.
she
See, I didn't know
advanced.
that.
She'd asked in advance for it to come off the agenda.
So that's why I was confused, Megan, since you didn't say it until now. I didn't know that.
And I guess, I just wanna know where the board as a group is at on it, because, if we wanna table working on it, we can. I would like to see what the combined document looks at, so we can see how close we really are or aren't.
My comment would be that we give job descriptions out for teachers and we tell them what's expected of them. This was our opportunity to come together, not once but twice, for us to figure out what we expect, how we expect to work as a team. And I need that in front of me so that I can figure out that. And you know what? It doesn't mean I have to agree with everything that's on it, because we all have our own opinions. But I can build an allegiance with, you know, what people are thinking and where they're moving forward, if I know where they are.
I think it's simpler than that. If we can determine what we agree on, that's a good start.
That's kinda where I'm at.
I'll get my suggestions into you, Don.
We can get them in and then we can send that out and we'll see how close we are. That'd be great. Anything else on working agreements? Public, any comments on working agreements? Okay. A closed session is necessary tonight for the placement of individual students in special education programs and other matters related to individual students. Is there a motion to go into closed session for that item?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
I need a roll call vote, please.
Discussion?
Oh, discussion, yeah.
Can we add, exception 1 and exception 8 to that list? I'm gonna tell you what those are.
Exception 1 is the employment compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee to determine its validity. And what'd you say the other one was?
8, security
8,
procedures.
security procedures and the use of personnel and equipment to respond to an actual threatened or reasonably potential danger to the safety of employees, students, staff, or public property. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. If the board's good with adding those, we can.
Okay.
You okay with adding those? Okay. All right, so the motion is to go into closed session for those 3 reasons. Is there, would we like to amend the motion?
I'd like to make sure that the scheduled closed session is, however you say that, is the one that we do first, so that
Yes,
that person
because
can.
we have people here for
Right.
that, absolutely.
Is that okay?
Okay. Did we have a motion or second on that yet, or?
I had Larson and then Hennessy.
Okay, are you guys good with amending the motion to take in the other 2 items?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Have a roll call, vote, please.
Thank you for coming.
Hennessy,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Giles.
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes, we'll take a 5-minute break to clear the room and take care of some other necessary functions. Come back from closed session. We do not anticipate any business completing the closed session. Thank you for those who came tonight.